right, hello everyone. Welcome to today's live stream. This is the fourth entry now in WIRSPA's Icon series. Really excited to have you here with us today. As always, your host is WIRSPA Community Envoy Matt Dietrich, and joining him today, a very special guest, Margaret Monplaisir, the CEO of St Lucia Distillers. Matt is going to give a more formal, extended introduction to Margaret in just a moment. But before that, as always, I'm Will Hookinga from Zavvy.co. Just want to point out a few different ways that you can interact throughout the show today. So on your right, you'll see a chat box. Feel free to say hello. Let us know where you're joining us from around the world. If you have a question at any point for Margaret or Matt, there's a little button at the bottom of the screen that says Ask a Question. So just hit that button, send your question in. We'll be keeping an eye out for those throughout the show. And last but not least, if you want to invite your friends to join us, there's a share button at the top that makes it easy to do that. So, the more the merrier. Keep the people coming. But with all that said, Matt, I will turn things over to you now.
Oh, thank you, Will. It's a pleasure to be here. As longtime watchers of this series know, this is WIRSPA's 50th anniversary. We started back in 1971, and in the 50 years since then, all sorts of changes have happened in the Caribbean rum industry. And when I was chatting with Von Renwick, WIRSPA CEO, over a year ago, we said, we need to do something for the 50th anniversary. And one of the things we've come up with was to go back and revisit some of the people who have, and in some cases, like Margaret, still are dramatically influencing the Caribbean rum industry, and in particular the WIRSPA member distilleries. So I'm extremely honored and very happy to be introducing and chatting with Margaret Monplaisir. I first met her briefly in St Lucia. That was actually my first sort of direct WIRSPA interaction, formal WIRSPA interaction, when I went down to St Lucia for a meeting in 2019, and I met Margaret then, and we've chatted many times since then, and so it's a pleasure to have her on. So, Margaret, thank you for coming on with us.
For me, this is a surreal moment. I'm still pinching myself, I'm considered a rum icon. I'm very grateful and thankful and, honored to be on this forum today. And I want to thank WIRSPA, yourself, having watched the interviews with Lloyd and Isu and Evan, to be even considered in their category. I'm very honored. So yes, it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm really looking forward to the session
Great.
And sharing St Lucia Distillers with everybody.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and like I said, I'm sure everybody here knows, but St Lucia Distillers today is in my personal opinion, just making some of the best rum out there. Just the blends they're coming up with, and the mix of pot and column still rums. I've over the past 10 years that I've been in rum, I've seen them go from not a whole lot of people knowing about them to like their rums being highly in demand. So it's fantastic for me to be able to learn more about it with our watchers here, or guests here. So let's get started. So Margaret, tell us, go back to the beginning. How did you get involved with the Barnard family? How did that come about?
Oh, well. Well, as a youngster, I came from a very humble background. So myself and my siblings, we always had to have, jobs during the holidays. And I was fortunate this one year to land a job at, a hotel, the Malabar Beach Hotel, which belonged to the Barnard and was being run by Craig Barnard. And thereafter, every year, every summer holidays, I got my job. So for quite a few years throughout my teenage life, I had this job every single year. So I guess it came as no surprise that as soon as I had left school, it was expected that I come right back to work for the Barnards. So Mr. Craig Barnard made sure I came back into St Lucia Distillers, into the hotel. But this time he didn't give me a job working in the hotel, which he'd done previously. He had me to run this distribution company called Bobby. So there was I as a youngster, suddenly this being given this hotel supply company to manage, which was owned by the Barnards. And the Barnards had been around since it's the 1800s, the first Barnard having come as a missionary. And then his son branched off into trading. So over the years, the Barnard family had gotten involved in agriculture. They owned a number of estates, so they were planting sugarcane, and they had a rum distillery. And Dennis Barnard, who's third generation, that's Laurie and Craig's dad, had then the brilliant idea to convert his home, which was located on the beach, into a hotel. So that's how Malabar Beach. So the Barnards in St. Lucia were known for the hotels, and they continue to have hotels in St. Lucia today. So they own Malabar and Le Sport Hotel. And of course, Laurie, who was the older brother and chairman of the Barnard group of companies, and there were a lot of other companies in the group, was more into the agricultural side of the business. So he managed that side, which included the distillery. And that's how even St. Lucia Distillers came about. And that's where his history with the company. So yeah, so there started my history working with Craig Barnard, managing this hotel supply company, and eventually starting to distribute St. Lucia Distillers rums.
Yeah. How does it? Well, I was just going to say, like what you're telling me is absolutely, matches up with my research. I've researched the Barnard family, and it's actually interesting around the Caribbean. Many of these families who are associated with distilleries also were in many other businesses as well. So
Yes.
it's crazy to see like this. There's a name I recognize, and they're like in steamship shipping and so on and so forth. So the Barnard family was very much in line with that sort of with that, and you see it even today. There are still some well-known Caribbean rum families that are still in multiple businesses. So how did you make the jump from hotel manager, hotel supply to rum? That's a big jump. How did that happen?
Well, it's not quite as big a jump as you think, because hotels need alcohol. So in fact, Craig ran the hotel side of the business, and Laurie ran the distillery side, the estate side. And what happened was that in the early 1970s, and so while Laurie was present and part of it, what happened was St. Lucia went out of sugar production and had transferred into bananas, including the Barnard family in their own business. So it meant that they now had to import molasses, because rum from St. Lucia is made from molasses. So John Van Geest, who also had a distillery in Roseau, and that he had to shut down his distillery, and the Barnard family, who had theirs in Dennery, two very forward-thinking gentlemen, John Van Geest and Dennis Barnard, came together and thought to themselves, we're the last distilleries on island. Why don't we merge our operations? So in 1972, they formed St. Lucia Distillers. They merged their operations, and Dennis's son, Laurie, so this is where Laurie came on board, joined the board of St. Lucia Distillers. But for many years, it was the Geest side, John Van Geest and his team. He had a team. He wasn't based in St. Lucia, but he had a team of managers. They are the ones that really managed the distilleries until 1988, when Laurie then took over as chairman of St. Lucia Distillers. So he only sat on the board. He wasn't actively involved initially in those days. And meantime, you had Craig running the hotel. And Laurie was chairman of the total Barnard group. So you're talking now towards the late 1980s, early 1990. I have to also state that St. Lucia Distillers products were being distributed by another distribution company in St. Lucia, not Bobby Limited, right? So Bobby Limited was hotel supplies. We started to sell a few items for St. Lucia Distillers. At that time, they were trying out making whiskey and vodka and all sorts of strange things they had evolved into, and we were selling a few bits and pieces for them. And then I found out the biggest selling rum in St. Lucia was Mangue rum. That's what St. Lucians were drinking. And this distributor who was selling St. Lucia Distillers rums and hadn't been very successful with them got the opportunity to get the agency for Mangue and was giving up the St. Lucia Distillers brands, which at that time was the Denros Bounty rum, um, in favor of Mangue. So, of course, the minute I got that piece of information, I had marched down to St. Lucia Distillers, met with Laurie Barnard, who had just taken over as chairman, and like, please, let me take the brand. We're going to do a lot of things with it. We're going to do an amazing job. Please give it to Barbie Limited. Your family owns Barbie Limited. So, hey, please give it to us. And guess what? He did.
Wow.
They gave us the agency and
Wow.
we never looked back. I mean, we went door to door, did what we had to do, and sales just climbed. So, because the hotel industry was very, very limited at the time, there were a few hotels and there wasn't much room to grow. So, I saw catering to the local market as being tremendous opportunity, and we never looked back. In fact, by 1990, sales had taken off. We were increasing market share. We became the dominant rum. And of course, so Laurie suddenly looked at me and thought, she's interesting. And he brought me into the St. Lucia Distillers group of companies and made me a director. So I've been a director for many years.
For 30 years, probably.
Yeah, at least from the early, I think by 1990, I think I was a director
Over 30 years.
of St. Lucia Distillers. And so he brought me into St. Lucia Distillers and then later, St. Lucia Distillers bought Barbie from the hotels. It's all one family, but it's a very strange shareholding arrangement. So St. Lucia Distillers purchased Barbie, and our local sales then were far out. We did much more local sales. I mean, we moved from an operation where we didn't even sell $1 million a year. But by the time my office moved down here, I was selling 10 million EC dollars a year. I mean, we had grown into a massive operation. So we moved on, and that's how there started my journey into rum, and having to learn the rum industry. So never considered myself an expert until today, that you've called me an icon, but
yeah. I mean, you've been involved for 30 years, and it's important. Like we were saying before we started, I was saying that I think a lot of the new rum enthusiasts have no idea how much the rum industry has evolved in the last 20 years, that the transition from bulk rum to premium rums, that brands like St. Lucia Distillers probably wouldn't even have distribution in a country like the United States 30 years ago. So your work in those 30 years certainly qualifies you as an icon.
Thank you.
Thank you. So what was it like to work? So now you came and worked with Laurie Barnard. What was he like to work with? Tell us about Laurie.
Oh my word, he was a fascinating person. Laurie Barnard, though very humble and not an ostentatious person or anything, very simple, very humble, but a great mind, very creative. And he had a great passion for two things: rum and plants. He loved anything to do with agriculture, which is, I guess, why we went back into planting sugarcane. He was probably missing it. And I would always tease him and ask him, if I cut him, would I see rum flowing from his veins or would I see blood? You're never quite sure, because it was always a new idea. And everybody, anybody who's been to WIRSPA meetings, you would know when he struck up a conversation, it was all about rum and what you were doing. And he would come back and say, that's a good idea. I think we should try that. Excellent idea. Let's try this. Let's do this. And it's reading books. I mean, when he passed, we had boxes of books to deal with. I have a few. His wife took a few. We just had so many books because he was always reading, always trying to increase his knowledge. He always felt he didn't know enough. And so was always coming, there was always something more. And he was never satisfied. So we accomplish something, we get to this step, but there's always another project. It's always, okay, what else are we doing? What's next? um but so he was very fascinating to work with. I thoroughly enjoyed working with him. An example of his humility, I remember Ernst and Young, they had the Caribbean entrepreneur competition ongoing. And he was one of, the people being brought forward as maybe somebody who could go up for this reach competition. And so I thought, yes, absolutely. He was so uncooperative while I'm trying to fill out these forms. Why does nobody's interested in me? Why would anybody want to know about me? You're wasting my time. I literally had to go to his home. He was traveling. Poor Mrs. Barnard is answering questions with me while we're filling in these forms because he felt the news. And guess what? He won it. He won the Caribbean in 2004. He won Caribbean Entrepreneur of the Year, and then he got to go off to Monaco to represent the Caribbean in the Global Entrepreneur. Well, he didn't win that one, but at least he got a good trip and experience out of it. But that just tells you the type of humility and humble person that he was. He didn't think anybody would be interested in in knowing him, or he had anything, but he was just an amazing person. And so it is no surprise that he's left us a tremendous legacy today, that this is what St Lucia Distillers is able to offer to everybody now, all of his hard work and what he's contributed.
Right.
So,
and I've heard many other leaders of distilleries. I shall not name them, but they've also had nothing but great things to say about Laurie.
Yes. Absolutely.
So you touched on this a little bit earlier, but take us back to say 1990 or so, when you decided to take over St Lucia Distillers from the distribution side and grow it. Give us a sense of like what the company was like, the rum industry and the company's, rum, what they were doing with rum in the 1990s. Sort of, we want to contrast that with what we know today. What was it like 30 years ago?
Truthfully, 30 years ago, we were quite a busy distillery because we actually work 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, year round, because we were producing bulk rum for export to the UK. So the own name rums that places like Tesco, Asda, Safeways, the rums they sold, a lot of it came from St. Lucia. We had a really good business going here for many years. And I think maybe that led to a certain amount of complacency. There wasn't enough focus maybe on brands, but so that's why I had to fight a bit to get my bounty rum and to put the effort and so behind it. But then obviously all of that disappeared at some point. Meantime, luckily for us, we had grown the local market because when we lost protection, which is where the whole EU funds came about.
The 0 for 0 agreement. Yeah.
Right. The 0 for 0 agreement. It meant that we no longer, every contract we bid on, we were not successful. I remember we worked with a distillery called Hayman Distillers out of the UK. So we had very little branded product. It was just a little bit of bounty we were selling in St. Lucia, and we had to depend on that and continue to grow that business. Fortunately, it was growing. And from there, when out of desperation, so we moved to working like 5 days a week. We had breaks in between. We just didn't need to produce as much as we were producing. We realized we've got to start producing more product. We need to get branded product. And of course, fortunately, the EU funds came in at that same time, and we really started looking at the export market, which is where our whole relationship with Angus Dora came about, because we created...
We'll talk about that in a little
bit. So we recognized we had to do more. We went more into brands. I don't know if you want me to go into the Admiral Rodney.
Yeah. So what was the recap? In 1990 it was almost entirely, other than what you were selling locally in St. Lucia, like with the Denross rum and the Bounty. It was a bulk rum distillery. So what
Yeah.
was sort of the first concerted effort into premium rums that we would recognize today? What was that?
Well, it wasn't until actually, if you were into the 1990s, which is why I felt I needed to mention the Admiral Rodney, which
Yeah.
had been around since, and I'm just checking. I had a list here with all my a few dates on it, so I'm just double checking it because to me it was 1981.
Okay.
Right. So we had launched Bounty Rum, which I mentioned before,
Right.
from 1975.
Right.
And that when I took over, we had quite a bit of success. St. Lucians were now drinking it to this day. St. Lucians consider Bounty Rum the spirit of St. Lucia, and that is what St. Lucians are loyal and faithful to that brand and will drink that brand. But by 1981, remember we had merged, the distillery had started in 1972. Well, 1981 was the distillery's first attempt at making an aged rum, a premium rum.
Right.
They had a bit of aged product there, and they thought, great idea. We have some aged rum. Let us put this in a bottle and put it out there. Admiral Rodney rum.
Right.
Well, you know, my discerning St. Lucians didn't take to it.
Yeah.
I think they sold a few cases and it didn't do very well. So I think that incident deflated the board of St. Lucia Distillers at the time, the management, and so that's why I think there were no real efforts until it was the 1990s. So let's see, when did we? The first real one we did, it wasn't until 2001. I'm checking here at Chairman's Reserve. Remember, Laurie Barnard, 1998, I think, had gone out. And of course, you know, all his ideas, he's always creating something. Got a pot still and bought this pot still and put in the distillery. Meantime, we got into an arrangement with Angus Dora because we recognized we needed to start export. So
actually, take us back through that a little bit. I think there's some interesting history here. So tell us first about how Angus Dora became involved, and then segue that into how you ended up with the pot still.
Okay, so we recognize, we all discussed, you know, we'd lost all this export business, the bulk of our distillery, we had reduced hours. We recognized we had to really do exports. We'd now gotten to 90% of the St. Lucia market. There really wasn't much room to grow. We dominated in the St. Lucia market, and the only way to go is export. So we've had to, you know, at the board, we had a good think, and we thought to ourselves, who's a good partner? We don't have the expertise. None of us. Laurie Barnard was about creating rum. He wasn't about selling and going out there and promoting and whatnot. We didn't even, the logistics, what did you do? I mean, all these things. So then we thought Angus Dora, a good partner, solid company. They had the Angus Dora bitters. They have some rums. They're out in the market. Let's approach them. And that's what he did. He approached them and offered them 25%. And at the same time, they were looking at creating CL World brands and looked at our products and thought, great. So Angus Dora came on board and most certainly made a tremendous contribution that we will always be grateful for, apart from injecting some capital, which helped us to improve our process. They did help us a lot with logistics, but surprisingly, but you know, help comes from areas that you never expect. We got this pot still, this amazing pot still from Angus Dora. We got a Vendome pot still, which we had already purchased the John Doe pot still and installed in 1998. So we put in the Vendome from them. We got that in 2003. Angus Dora, I mean, whatever, it was literally a gift from Angus Dora.
I interviewed John George about this, and he said, and I said, like, how is it that they're your pot still? You know, and at the time, I was not aware of sort of the fact that Angus Dora had invested later and now owned
Yes.
owned
Yeah.
St. Lucia. And as well,
25%.
he said,
Yeah.
like, we ran it a couple of times, and my recollection is that we ran it a couple of times, and it just wasn't making the style of rum we were looking for making. And so, you know, we kind of gave it to St. Lucia Distillers.
Yep. I mean, nobody was into pot still rum. We thought Laurie Barnard was crazy to be buying a pot still. I have to admit, when I tasted the first sample out of that pot still, it is so different to what we'd been producing off the column. To some, we thought he was a bit, he'd gone a bit loony with this idea.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was the right thing to do. It led us to more creativity, doing more with our rums, and so we got this gift from Angus Dora, as well as Angus Dora helped quite a bit in terms of our quality assurance. We had people like Vidya Dudnath, John Georges. These guys came in and helped us with our laboratory and our quality systems, and so. St. Lucia Distillers the growth throughout the years, we just continued to grow. Like I said, Laurie Barnard and I think St. Lucia Distillers by extension, we like sponges. Everything that comes on, we absorb and we learn and we take on board and we move. We go a step higher, and that's what Angus Dora did for us. So there we are. We have our 2 pot stills. We're able to make rum. Meantime, in the lab, they'd been experimenting and trying out. So we took on board the Chairman's Reserve. We launched Chairman's because, and part of the reason was that Bounty, when we tried to register Bounty at the time, we were told it would be a very difficult brand name to register because you had so many other things, the chocolates, the paper towels, you had other products out there, and it would be a challenge. So we thought, let us come out with a new rum, something also that was a bit different, blending the column with the pot stills, they were aged separately, they were then blended and then put back to age again for 6 months before bottling.
Right.
And that's when we came out with Chairman's Reserve. In the meantime, shortly after those, so Chairman's we launched in 2001, and that was for the export market. But don't forget, we had all this beautiful aged rum just sitting there that we had not used, right? Our first attempt at Admiral Rodney was a disaster.
Right.
So, I think Chairman's Reserve gave us a bit of confidence because, it had a good success story. Even St. Lucians were buying on, had taken to Chairman's Reserve. We had started exports to the UK. So we thought, let's revisit Admiral Rodney, which is an older rum, 8 years old and up. But we didn't try to blend it ourselves. So we brought in this gentleman that was a retired blender out of Guyana. And we brought him in to come and help us make the new blend of Admiral Rodney, which was now in 2002, a year after Chairman's Reserve. And the gentleman came in, and what should have taken him a few days, he blended in 1 day. And when we asked, well, how you were able to do this? He said to us, this was the most amazing rum I had ever had to work with. He said this was an easy job. So we're like, well, okay, we failed the first time. So what did we do wrong? And all it was simply filtration. We hadn't paid enough attention to filtration. We hadn't paid enough attention to how we were selecting our casks. You literally, when you're making a premium product, you have to go cask by cask, checking your rum to make sure that, because the cask, I'm speaking to experts around here, so who am I trying to convince? Our selection process had to be a bit more discerning, and we would get amazing rums, and that was it. We learned from there, and by that time, we felt very confident and we were ready. So there we were, and that's when we really took off now in creating the branded rums and putting rums out there into the market. A slow process. We didn't have the finances to go crazy, but we had some nice rums to offer the market.
Right. So just for the relatively newcomers to the rum space, I will say the Admiral Rodney of 2001 is not the Admiral Rodney today. We know different expressions. Royal Oak. It was. I remember it was one of the very first St. Lucia Distiller rums that I purchased on my own. I think back in 2010 or something like that. So I have fond memories of that particular rum. So it sounds like what you're telling us is after Angus Dora had purchased you in I think 96, 96, 98 or so.
Um, 1998,
Yeah,
yes. We sold
1998. So
2014, yeah.
basically, yeah. So after that, a couple years later, 2000, 2001, that's when things really started to come together for St Lucia Distillers.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. We had gotten the cash injection, we got the logistics right. Angus Dora brought a lot, and really set us on the right path. Well, of course, that meant that Angus Dora was interested in owning St. Lucia Distillers. And in fact, Clico, who owns Angus Dora, then went on to purchase St. Lucia Distillers.
Right.
So in 2006, we were not fully owned by Angus Dora, but we became under the same ownership as Angus Dora.
Yeah. And for anybody who's curious about this, there's actually a much larger story. There's a story on my website, but it was Clico owned Angus Dora, St. Lucia Distillers, several more Caribbean rum distilleries.
Yeah.
Even owned, believe it or not, owned Ine Shear for a few years. So,
yes, Ray and nephew.
Like a very yeah. So forgetting Ray and nephew. So yeah, it's a very interesting story of how how they acquired all these companies, and then how the global financial crisis just sort of like unraveled everything. So, but that's not what we're going to talking about here. But so where we are is sort of like 2001. Things started going well. You're starting to put down stocks. Your expression is doing well, and then there was this horrible fire. Tell us about that. Tell us about that fire.
I remember it very clearly to this day. I'll never forget it. Early hours of the 2nd of May, 2007, my phone rings. I'm fast asleep in my bed. My phone rings, and it's someone saying, I'm calling from Roseau. The distillery's on fire. Okay, thank you. Very strange, hung up the phone. These days, we were still using the proper landlines. My phone rings again. Miss, the distillery's on fire. I'm like, okay, so this is serious now. And then I got a third call. The distillery's on fire. So by this point now, I call Laurie Barnard. Mr. B, I think the distillery is on fire. And then, so he said, oh my, okay, he's coming to get me, because we didn't live too far from each other. So that was quickly changed, and he came across in no time. I think we both got dressed in record time and head down to the distillery. And there it was, as we came over the hill looking onto the distillery. You just saw these massive flames. The fire department was slightly ahead of us. They were on their way there, and it was just a moment never to be forgotten. You just saw that the whole admin building was on fire. The distillery, the fire had started in the distillery. But everybody quickly got there. Unfortunately, it's always been our policy to hire people from the nearby communities. We're the largest employer in our community. And so a lot of the staff turned out, and that was the fire department is asking, okay, get a forklift to do this, move this, and staff were there. And I mean, if people came in and they were clearing things where they could. You're talking, the distillery is on fire, but the fire department was able to put out the distillery very quickly, and the admin building, which housed our blending facility, our laboratory, that obviously burnt for a number of days. And sadly, it turned out that during the early hours, armed gunmen had entered the distillery, and it was deliberately set on fire. The timing matches the discovery of some fraud at the distillery. But this time we were part of the Clico ownership, so the timing matches some fraud that was occurring at the same time. So you have to make the assumption that there was a connection, but it did so. That it was a day that I'll never forget. But you know what? It did set us on a new path. It set when we were able to build instead of having to adjust and maneuver around old facilities. Meant we were able to build a blending facility that was newer, that had greater capacity. It meant that we were able to move forward. It set us back a few years. A number of products, for example, our cream range. I didn't speak about, we had a joint venture agreement with a Martinican company, and that was even before Angus Dora in 1993. And that was where we acquired our bottling line and whatnot, where we were making all these beautiful cream products and liqueurs. And so we couldn't make those products for a few years because we had to focus on rum, which is our core business.
Right.
But we moved on from the fire, and we even got a fantastic rum out of it.
Yes, so tell us
Reserve Forgotten Casks.
Yes, tell us. So with the fire, we know so what was the original Forgotten Cask?
Okay, so the original Forgotten Cask. What happened was that obviously with the admin building having burnt, we had to move offices into the warehouse. So the warehouse space was now had to house a lab, offices. So we were cramped. I mean, there was just no space. Chairman's Reserve, as I discussed earlier, is made from pot and column still, which had been aged previously, but then blended together and aged a further 6 months. So poor Cyril Mangal, our cellar master, poor guy, he was just having to find space wherever he could to put products. So there he was shoving. We have this warehouse in the southeastern corner of our distillery, and he was just shoving barrels into it. And it was not until after we built this building in 2000 May. It was my dream. May 2nd, 2009, we moved into these new facilities, a new building. And it was only after that we were able to clear up and sort through the all the stock. And there it was, some Chairman's Reserve that had, I can't remember the exact quantity, so I don't want to give the wrong amount, but a nice big stack of Chairman's Reserve that had stayed there for almost 5 years. So, I mean, everybody got excited. Let's taste this rum. And when we tasted, I remember the day, it was great excitement in the lab. We were all going and tasting. This product tasted so good. It was amazing, the transformation that had occurred in the 5 years. You would not think, well, Chairman's could get better. Well, it did. And it was like, well, we couldn't possibly put this in regular Chairman's. It will make the product very different. And then people will demand this new product. Then what do we do? So, of course, Michael Speakman, our marketing manager, decided contact this UK company. And I think it was Strange on. They said to us, but this is very easy. The Forgotten Casks. I mean, these were the ones that were there. They were forgotten, right? Cyril Mangal is not very happy with the name, I have to admit. Cyril says he never forgot the casks. He knew they were there. It was only that he couldn't reach them. So I have to put in that disclaimer so I don't get in trouble with Cyril, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it was a beautiful name, whether the casks were forgotten or Cyril, whether Cyril forgot the casks or he knew they were there but couldn't reach them. That's another story. But they became the Forgotten Casks. And when we put them out to market, the thing was so successful. We're like, we're going to forget some casks every year. So that's what we continue to do. I mean, it's a little difficult because you have to plan 5 years in advance, right, how many casks you're going to forget because you've got to blend these rums together. Yeah. But it's been a successful story, and I think a great rum, and it's one that I personally continue to drink. So there we go.
Yeah. And it is one of those rums. Just like, I just feel like tonight, and I'll pour myself a glass of it. So now let's fast forward another few more years. Errol Bernard unfortunately passes away. What are your recollections of that? What was that like for you?
Well, I always remember Laurie was always full of energy, full of life. He promised me he was going to be around till he was 100, and that we would have to put a lift in place for him, for him to come to work, which is what he always said. So being a very energetic person, suddenly, he started to feel ill, and then only to discover, you're talking, we had like 2 or 3 days notice when they did the scan. He kept avoiding this MRI or whatever. When they actually did the scan and said, we observed some cancer. And so we had very little time to really adjust, where Laurie was on a plane and he says, I'm going to fight it. I'm off to the UK. We're going to fight this cancer, which is, was a very aggressive stomach cancer. And I have to, so there he was in the UK, left us behind. Suddenly, I was in a position I had never in my life imagined I would be, but I had to hold on because I was the only person left.
You were suddenly in charge.
Yes,
Yeah.
I was suddenly in charge. I was left in charge of Laurie's baby. And so throughout his sickness, he never really let on how bad he was to me, but we spoke every week, and he was always interested in what was going on at St Lucia Distillers. I remember having a difficulty. We had a drought. We were having problems with water. I tried damming up a river, but people complained and went and affected the dam. And he was the one in his hospital bed telling me, Margaret, there's a pond that the government has and they're not using it. Why don't you approach them? And there I was able to approach government, get this pond working, make the investment and long-term arrangement. To this day, we still use that pond, which now farmers and everybody around the community. And this was why Laurie was sick in his bed, and little did I know was, deteriorating. I hadn't any idea. And so we had our weekly conversations. We continued, and then he called me during one of our conversations. He goes, oh, I'm doing much better. So Mrs. Barnard is going to come down, come back to St. Lucia. She's going to sort out a few issues, just help her out with anything she needs, since I'm doing much better. And so there it was. Mrs. Barnard came to St. Lucia. And on my way to work, Mrs. Barnard, was it the second day she's on island or something? She's calling me the morning, and I'm thinking, okay, it's the sort of stuff. And she goes, are you in the office? I'm like, yeah, I'm in the office. And she said, okay, you may need to sit down. I'm like, oh, no. So I sat down. She goes, Mr. Barnard is no longer with us. He passed last night, or it was early hours of the morning. And I was like, wow, that hit me, because you just wasn't expecting it. He had left us in January, and this was now October, and he'd passed. I will never forget that day. And the most, I'm very grateful that I had him for those few months that I had him, with our weekly conversations and guiding me through what to do. So I knew what he wanted. I knew, he really helped me. And, so it was just something we just had to deal with, his passing. But I expect that his legacy will continue to live on, and live in this company forever. He set the culture, he set the tone, he gave us the foundation. I'm just sorry he's not here to see the wonderful things that are happening right now.
Yeah. So what were the sort of the weeks and months after that? Like, were you sort of immediately now the managing director of the distillery? What happened there?
Hi, I'm female. No such luck. This is not how it works. Even me being in this position, it had to take, we had I was never ever, while I was always there, 36 years I'm working with the Barnards, working with the company, right? I've always there, always in the background, always there. I had gone to school at night, so I got my first degree, my master's, thanks WIRSPA for fun. That was all part of the EU funds. I was able to do my master's. I was qualified, and I was always there. But we had one person who was earmarked as being a successor was terminated. A second one who was being earmarked as a successor, and all these people were being coached and whatnot. Um, he resigned, so it left me. So I held on for the months Laurie was ill, and then by that time now you had Clico going into receivership. So we had two receivers. We had a totally new board who came on board, who came and were running St Lucia Distillers. And I had to report to this board. And like they said to me, well, we don't know you. We don't know the company. We're here to sell the company. So I had to wait I think it was almost another year. It wasn't, towards the end of probably 2012 by 2013, by the time I was appointed. And I'm going to tell you a story, which is a very weird story.
Okay.
But the most amazing thing happened, and I have Rita, Laurie's secretary, who can attest to this. While Laurie was gone, we had a major problem in Laurie's office while he was in hospital in the UK, where there would be water on the floor in his office, and we couldn't understand it. We spent thousands of dollars breaking walls, fixing pipes, changing AC units, doing all sorts of things. And this water would appear. There was nothing we could do. And do you know, the day I was appointed and we opened the office and there was zero water. It was the most fascinating thing.
Wow.
To this day, I was freaked out. Rita was freaked out. We have never had water in the office to this day, from the day I was appointed. So we believe that Errol Bernard insisted that I had to have that job.
Okay, yeah, I like that. Yeah, that's a good story. So you had alluded to the Clico and the receivership and the boards and things like that. So in 2016, if I remember my dates correct, St Lucia Distillers was sold to Group Bernard Hale, or GBH, as I like to say, Rum Clement and Rum JM. What was that transition like for you?
A lot smoother than I anticipated, I have to admit. GBH, we had gone from family company to what can I say, a public company type of arrangement, because even though the company purchased us may not have been public, but it was an insurance company, so it was all about investment. Suddenly back to a family company. So they're not about short-term investment, it's about building for the future. And I think, somebody up there is blessing us, because it's been a wonderful relationship. These guys have embraced St Lucia Distillers and who we are. They have invested. So all the things we needed, we're getting warehouse space. We have beautiful cellars now. We're getting up-to-date facilities in our distillery. You're talking, for the last 36 years that I was here, last 30 years or so, for the first 30 years, the investments were, bit by bit, it's what you could afford. Suddenly you've got somebody who said, you've got great products, you've got great staff, you've got a great team. And it's all about not changing us, but developing us and growing us. And so I think a lot of the success we're seeing in the international market is as a result of this new team. Unfortunately, they speak French. I don't.
Despite the last name.
Despite the last name. I don't speak French, so that part has been a bit of a challenge for me. But now we've got Mr. Loic Leger. Head office has sent in Mr. Leger, and so he's now based in St. Lucia, and he's done a lot to be able to help that transition, that translation. But they've embraced our culture, they've taken our products, and what GBH has, with each relationship, things have happened. Our product, we had excellent products, but we had terrible marketing. Good for the local market, not international, and terrible packaging. Our packaging wasn't much to talk about. And GBH was able to help us rationalize our products, put them into groups, fix the packaging, and take us to new places. And look, like now we're out there telling our story and whatnot. And that's what GBH has brought, that professionalism and international exposure. They've brought that to the table. So with every relationship, this company has grown. It's just been amazing to see. Well, I have 10 more years, so let's see what happens in that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I can attest to it. Like I've seen what GBH has done with after purchasing Lamont and what they've done with JM, and it seems like they're on
Yep.
sort of like investing for the future with St Lucia Distillers. So I'm going to turn now to WIRSPA, which is
Ah.
one of the reasons for here. What was your initial WIRSPA interactions? Like, how did you come to be part of the WIRSPA family?
Well, Laurie always believed that, and I am convinced of it as well, that being part of WISPER was extremely important to us. You know, and that was the go-to organization. One, you get to meet everybody else in the industry. No problem that you have someone else has not faced, and then you get to meet all the big players. You get to know what's happening, what's the future, what's going on. So he always felt that we had to play a role at WISPA, and we always had to be present at all meetings. So whenever he went to attended a meeting, he would bring his entourage with him, depending on what topic was being discussed. So I was fortunate in that respect, in that because I was in all aspects of the operations at St Lucia Distillers, I was always at the meetings because I was involved in every area. While, Michael would come when it was a sales operation, when it was a sales related. It depends on who. The technical team would come. So he always brought a team. So we've been whisper present at all whisper events. So you always had, and then in those days you had the meetings, but then we would have a technical meeting attached. People like Lloyd. If you all interviewed Lloyd. The knowledge, what comes out of this man is amazing. So we would all attend the technical meetings, and even people like me who am not a technical person, I have to say I learned a lot from attending those meetings. So yes, for many years I attended most WISPER meetings. So with Laurie passing, the transition towards me replacing him at the WISPER meetings, and in more recent years, I'm even a part of the executive committee, which again is another honor to be part of the executive committee. But I've always been there, being able to participate and being part of the process. And I quite like the fact that even though we're small, we have as much of a voice as the larger islands, because really when you go to WISPA is an inclusive organization. It's all about representing the island. So whoever is there, each island is a vote. So
Right.
St. Lucia, in as much as we were one distillery, small compared to many around the region, we were a vote as well, and a voice at WISPER. So yes, I've been around for many years.
So I want to go back to early 2000s.
Uh-huh.
You mentioned that the Rum Sector program and the funding for it. This funding wasn't just like handed out to the distilleries.
No.
It wasn't just like here's money for you and here's like there was a process involved. What was your involvement in that?
Well, I was very good at identifying projects for for funding. I have to admit that part.
Okay.
We do everything as a team. We actually had a team leader, Kathy Felix, and she was one who would actually sit down and write up a lot of the proposals. We had Kathy, we had a guy called Brian Booth, of course, Laurie Barnard. But we all sat together and we would find what projects we needed to get funded. And so we were able to get our replacement admin building, because we had the blending facility in here, the laboratory, all of that. We were able to get those projects funded. So we got quite a few projects funded. But I think my biggest contribution when I started to think about it was actually coming up with projects, with all the ideas and how we could fund things, and and get research material, and assist Kathy and or whoever was writing up the project with putting together the information. So that's how we did it, and we were quite successful. I think we may have been one of the first projects to get funded. One of our projects was one of the first. And I admit that my master's program was one of those projects that was funded by WIRSPA. So I have to thank WIRSPA.
I do know that there were, I believe, several hundred different projects approved over the 5 or 6 years or so that it ran, and I think people don't realize just how much of the sort of the boom in the Caribbean distilleries in terms of like new stills or new barrels, new aging warehouses, new marketing programs, how much of that came about as a result of these programs, basically the EU funding, and that WIRSPA oversaw the sort of like looking at proposals like you would write and like approve them or say, change this or whatnot. So, it's recent history that not many people know about.
And they did a good job because, the funding was timely. We were held to account in terms of the reports. And so I think I must congratulate WIRSPA. They did an excellent job.
Right. So you touched on this briefly earlier, but in the last few years, say over the last decade or so, what is the WIRSPA membership? Like what is St Lucia Distillers getting from their membership?
Well, I did indicate they're our go-to. I still broke down. Vaughn, who do you know repairs still? We have this problem. Who can I turn to? So, yeah, WIRSPA is the go-to. I'm just being funny here. WIRSPA is the go-to organization. They can always guide you to a good consultant, another distillery who's had the problem. The technical seminars, when WIRSPA has the technical seminars, we're always trying to get the maximum benefit, trying to send as many people as possible, because it's where you learn. And you don't just learn from what the lecturer, whoever is teaching you, but what we find is people learn from each other. Somebody's experienced a problem, they share it with somebody else who already experienced and may have a solution. It's all of those things. So that's where, in terms of the technical support, WIRSPA has been a rock for us. Other areas where WIRSPA has been extremely helpful, I'm not sure if people may recall, but we had where we've had to come together to overcome a hurdle. We had a year where we couldn't get barrels. There was just a shortage of barrels, and the whole industry was suffering. And so all the distilleries through WIRSPA were able to come together and put out, our requirement for barrels, and we were able to buy jointly. And if it wasn't for that, who knows if that year we would have been able to put any rum down to age, because we were desperate for barrels. We've done things like purchasing molasses collectively, where there have been challenges, especially for us smaller distilleries who need smaller quantities. We don't have the storage, to take the very large shipments, and we're able to, through WIRSPA, collaborate with the larger distilleries to get molasses shipments, to suit our size. And this is where WIRSPA has been a gem, and we really. Maybe it's we're being a smaller distillery and we're desperate and need the help. But I think that's where WIRSPA has been really vital to us, and we will always continue to be part and make our contribution as much as we can.
You touched on something which, for me, coming into the community envoy role, but studying the history, is what I've realized is just how much of what the benefit WIRSPA has is essentially amplifying the individual distilleries, individual countries. They're amplifying their collective reach. But by themselves, they may not be able to make the right deal or get the right access, but collectively, to working together, binding together, working together, they've achieved things that none of them would have achieved on their own. I think
yes,
your personal
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. So, as somebody who's now on the executive committee of WIRSPA, what are some of the things you'd like to see WIRSPA and its members focus on going forward?
Well, I mean, I would say we're doing a lot of good things, and I think we need to continue. The area of advocacy we have to continue in that area. It is important that WISPA continues its relationships with, with CARICOM, with the EU. That WISPA also is aware of what's happening. Look, we know with all the challenges in terms of WHO and the threats against rum, and how rum is perceived, and what we're going to have to do going forward. Um, WISPA, that has got to be always on the agenda. I think
Yeah.
these are very important, and they must continue. um, a pet project for me, which I would like WISPA to continue. I know we signed the MOU with University of the West Indies, but I strongly believe that we need to get that certification program off the ground. Because we have a lot of people who've worked in the industry but don't have the papers to show that they're qualified in the area of rum distillation or blending or whatever. And so I think that's an area that will add some more credibility and give our workers, the people in the industry, a little more, oomph. you know, I
Yeah.
think I think it'll be a big help to them. Apart from that, I think we've seen with people like you and your help, we've been more out on social media and out there, and I think we've got to continue. I think the world changed, technology changed how you communicate and got out there. In the old days, everybody all got together and had big events and socialize, and we were able to hash out all our problems that when we were in the room together. That's going to be more difficult, which means now WISPA has to be a much more present. And so I thank you for for helping us
Thank you.
get the coverage we need, and to get a message out there, and who we are. So yes, that's where I think that's what I think in terms of WISPA and what we should be doing.
Great. Good. Well, thank you for that. By the way, we have a few questions here. I see that my good friend Dave Russell has been active in the questions here. Um,
hmm
the first one, do you know Dave?
I think, yes, I do. Yes, I have met Dave Russell.
Yes, yes.
Absolutely.
Dave and I chat quite a bit, usually after these calls. So, after,
Oh,
uh,
ooh, Dave, give me a good rating, please, please, please.
no. So Dave asked, is there any consideration to making a rum exclusively from your own estate grown sugarcane juice? You mentioned on that briefly, but there is I think 5 acres or maybe more now, but
Oh, it's
of
more.
sugarcane
Wow.
juice that you're pressing. Um, how about a pot distilled aged rum, not blended with spirit from your column still? Like Dave wants more from you. What do you think about these things?
Okay. Well, Dave, you're in luck. Pot distilled rums. We have the chairman's master selection, where people actually buy their barrels and we bottle it for them. So there are a few options out there in terms of exclusive pot still rums. In terms of the sugarcane rum, it comes boils down to what are you prepared to pay for it. Our sugarcane is hand grown. You've seen it, Matt. It's all manual. These guys are cutting. With a machete, a cutlass, as they call it in St. Lucia. It's all done by hand. So it's quite an expensive product, but it's excellent. I think it's a great rum, especially after it's been aged a few years. And we do have some 18-year-old sugarcane rum, which I'm hoping we can convince um, the the marketing team to allow us to bottle some of that. I don't know if they'll do it in a master selection or a special thing, but we do have a little bit of it. Unfortunately, our quantities are very small. It's between the most we've ever made in a year is 30 barrels. We're now looking for more land,
Right.
and I'm going to do some more, some more planting. That's our plan. But the quantities are small.
Newsflash.
It's
That's
expensive.
what we want to hear. Yeah, we want to hear more cane juice.
So that's where we are. That's where we are with that. But you can, get exclusive rums if you buy specific barrels. But we bottle it off for you under our master selection. So talk to Ben
Yeah.
or Matthew or one of those guys and see.
Okay.
Be nice to them.
Yeah. I think Dave. I think some people may not know that, but I think Dave knows because he's asked. He said, "For Margaret or Ben Jones, will the Chairman's Reserve Vintage 2009 expression be sold in California and when?"
I think if Ben is on, maybe Ben is going to answer that question. He
Yeah,
handles the U.S.
He
market,
handles
so
all
if
that.
he's on,
Yeah.
hopefully he will answer that.
I'm sure he
the
will.
chat.
We'll track him down if he doesn't.
Yes.
And actually, so Dave's next question is one I've had myself, having done written my St Lucia Distillers article and researched the island and its rum history as much as possible. It says, is there anything remaining of the still at the Dennery, and where in Dennery is it located?
Okay, I think the building is still there from what I've been told. But what happened is the Barnards actually removed all the equipment and brought it here to Roseau. So that first still, I think it was a Blaise still. I never saw it. It was before me, but I think it was called a Blaise.
Blair column, probably.
A Blair column, yes. Yeah. I think that's what it was. Unfortunately, at the time, Geest was the one running it. They were more a shipping company than a rum operation, so it was like a side business. And unfortunately, when that still got too small, because remember we were doing bulk rum and it was all about volume and getting these large volumes off to the UK, because Geese was a shipping company and they had all these contracts. They destroyed and sold all of it as scrap metal and put in the new let me see, the still we have currently was installed. I'm looking to see, I had a note there. The coffee still that we have now, I'm not seeing the date.
It may be in my article, I'm not sure.
Yeah, probably. But it was installed at some point, the coffee still 1985.
Okay.
So in 1985 they got rid of that Blaise column. You said it was a Blair column, right? They got rid of it and put in the still that we have to this day, our coffee still. So that's what happened. There's very little left. You may see a building alone out of the Dennery estate, but that's it.
Right. Yeah.
Sadly.
Yeah.
And I'm still suffering over the beautiful pot still that the staff keep telling me about. What a shame.
Yeah, and I know you and I talked about there was another rum distillery in St. Lucia that's basically in ruins now. I would love to go see.
There are a few actually. You get a few bits and pieces, because at one point St. Lucia had like up to 10 distilleries around the island.
Right.
But when they went out of sugarcane, most people just shut down the distillery, because you had a distillery wherever you had a sugar estate. So.
Yeah.
Balambush. You're talking Balambush, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
That has bits and pieces. Yep. In the north of the island, there's a place with a couple pieces as well. So you are getting them throughout the island, but it's not usable equipment.
Oh no. Just from the historical perspective, and the same thing on Grenada as well. You're just sort of like nature will reclaim these distilleries.
Yeah.
It's sort of
it's a shame, huh?
Heartbreaking, Okay, and
we couldn't see into the future to preserve a lot of those things.
That's what we're trying to do now. It seems like Ben did reply to Dave, which is good.
There we go.
Another question I have, I would love to get some photos myself, is, Margaret, can you describe the improvements that have been made at the visitor center?
The visitor center, that project has just started. We're addressing we had to address the industrial side, so that we could create space. So I'll tell you a little bit. So we've just finished building. We've built 2 new cellars. They can hold 3,700 barrels each, and they're filled already. Okay,
Good.
shocking. They're filled already. You know
Good.
us. We're always doing something here. So we have these 2 new cellars. We have a beautiful barrel filling facility now. So our guys can now undercover with the proper meters and tankages and stuff. Before we filled barrels outside in the open. Don't tell anybody I told you, but that's what happened. So when it rained, we couldn't do anything. We couldn't fill barrels or anything because it was raining. Because the guys did it outside in the open, and the outside was an extension of our warehouses, unfortunately. So we've got these new beautiful warehouses, a barrel filling facility. We're working on we almost finished fermentation shortly. We've put in some new tanks. We had some very inefficient, we had an inefficient propagator. And so we're going to put in some new tanks. We have a new beautiful fermentation building to expand our fermentation. So using our same still, same environment, we'll be able to increase our capacity by 30%.
Oh, wow.
Thank God for that, because you know what has happened since COVID. We've been having to put 30% of our production into alcohol just for sanitizing purposes, so for the hospitals, for all over. And
Yeah.
that has been a big strain on us because you can't put as much as you want down to age, so I'll be so grateful. Within the next month, the project is almost finished. So we have a new fermentation facility coming on board on stream now. So it's taken a while, but we have all these things that have come on, which are making the industrial side now more efficient. Last month, we've started now on the tourism project, which is going to be on the southern side of our property. We've just right now building a road. We have to put a new road in place because the road there's a road in between us and the properties and the land we just bought. So we've got to move it across to the other side. We need to put in a treatment plant, and we put in a little playing field for the Roseau community, the people who live right next door to us. And thereafter, we're going to be putting in, we're having to do some work on the distillery to add a mezzanine. We're going for a ISO 22,000 certification. So we need to make some changes. Right now, you come up close, so we need to just tidy up how visitors can enter our distillery, but we still will allow people to have the same amazing views and feel very much like you're part of the distillery.
Right.
So we're putting in a new distillery building. We're going to put in a lab, a mini lab, so the guys don't have to walk as much to go and get things tested, and so that they can do some basic testing there. And one of the cellars that we use now is actually the original distillery. So by having the new cellars in place, we've been able to empty that building, which is a beautiful old stone building. And that's how I found out about the pot still, because I could see the mark on the ground and I couldn't understand what it was. So now we're clearing that out, and we're going to clean it up nicely and put a nice museum in there talking about the history of rum in a beautiful ambient area. And then we're going to put in a beautiful shop and tasting area. And where we are, it's a high water table. So we're going to do some beautiful ponds with botanical gardens and grow our spices, all the spices that we put in our spice rums. We plan to put a spice garden so people can come and learn and experience. So we have great plans, but it's not until 2023 that that part is going to be ready. But I can't wait.
I know. I mean, I've been thinking about all these. No, I had such a great experience there, and I wrote this article and all these pictures and everything. Like, oh no, that picture's wrong now, and that picture's wrong now. I'm gonna have to return.
You have to come back. You have to come back. The good thing about COVID is that nobody's been for a while, so when they come, it's gonna be like, wow, what happened? You've changed.
So thank you for all of this. I've been looking at some of the comments as you've been talking, and I think people very much enjoyed this. And so this has been amazing. So anything you want to say before we head out?
All I can say is, I thank everybody here who's tuned in. I thank everybody who has supported St. Lucia Distillers on our journey. It's been fascinating, and we're truly grateful. We've been making wonderful rums, and we're really happy and pleased to see that other people are enjoying it. And we always appreciate the feedback, and of course, come visit us anytime. And I'm again thankful to WIRSPA for considering me an icon. I'm still pinching myself, trying to make sure that I'm not dreaming. And thank you, Matt, for giving me this opportunity. I must say I enjoyed myself. I did tell you I had butterflies in my stomach when we started, but I forgot the butterflies a long time ago, and I'm having fun.
That's what we're aiming for as well. So thank you for all of this. And I'll just mention for future programming, we do have more icons in the pipeline, and we're also hoping to return to our Rum Talk series, bring a few more distilleries into the fold. So we have much more coming. So Will, you want to take us out?
Yeah, just to echo everything Matt said, Margaret, this was wonderful. There were tons of great comments from people all over the world, all over the Caribbean. I'm just looking over at my screen over here and seeing them
wow.
all. So definitely
Thanks.
go. You'll have to go back afterwards and look through everything people said. But thanks, everyone. Obviously, there's a lot to look forward to coming from St. Lucia Distillers. I saw Ben Jones say they hope to show off the Chairman's 2009 at the California Rum Festival coming up in September. So something to look forward to if you're coming to that. And like Matt said, there are probably a couple of things coming up in September. So keep an eye on your email, and we look forward to seeing you then. But Margaret, thank you again. Matt, thanks. WIRSPA, thank you. And everyone for coming out and supporting and listening and enjoying all these great stories. Thanks for coming out today.
All right, take care.
All right.
Okay.
Cheers.
Thanks. Bye. All right. Bye.